Welcome everybody to the CU Digital Town Hall. These town halls were created in March of this year when the world collectively lost its mind and we didn't know what to do. And so what I decided to do to pull things together was this collaborative environment where I call it a town hall because my idea was that we would have discussions and share best practices. And initially, I actually wanted most of the Crayons to speak, but what we wound up doing is inviting guests with good thoughts. Sometimes it's just me, and really having a discussion. And a lot of people on the call are wonderful to speak up. Folks like Gary Coates, and Kevin Wright, who's always super helpful. We often have Jonathan from Hudson Valley, and we can't forget Tom O'Shea. So we're very fortunate to have these folks on. And what we try to do is just for the good of all, come up and talk about things that are coming up and what's happening. So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide. We'd like to thank our sponsors. We continue to work with CUNA Councils. If you're new to the credit union movement, even if you've been in the credit union for a long time, you can do no better than CUNA Councils. If you're looking for a collaborative environment, this is where you'll find it. I think there's like 52 councils, one for every job description in the credit union. Isn't that the way it works, Mike?
Yeah.
So like if you are an assistant administrator 2, I think you can join the assistant administrator 2 council, which meets in Jackson, Michigan, I think. No, I'm just kidding. They do have marketing, they have tech, and it's just a great place to meet your peers. Don't forget BIG. We are expanding. I'm excited to talk about more of our SDK stuff. We are doing work now. We started the conversations with Q2. We're already doing work with Alchemy. If you've got something you need built in your home banking and your vendor doesn't have time to do it, we do. Come talk to us. Right. And of course, the one, the only, the long-running, a long-time friend of mine, someone who agreed to join because I knew I couldn't always be available for this, given some of my workload. Just a good friend. I've traveled the world with him.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, literally. Those days in Singapore, John. Oh my gosh.
Well, and let's not forget Vienna. So, and I know you want to, but what happens in Vienna stays in Vienna.
That is true.
I'm never going to talk about any of those chickens. Those are weird. But you do what you got. I mean, it was good food.
Show.
I'm not going to lie, it was good food. So let's move on. And I think both of us. If you have not seen Mike's CU broadcast, you've been living under a rock. Mike is a prolific interviewer and has incredibly fantastic guests on. Check it out. If you're not on the mailing list, go to cubroadcast.com.
Thank you.
And I've got a podcast. I'm getting ready to do my wrap-up podcast for the year. So hope you guys check that out. It's very easy to find. Go to big-fintech.com. But the most important thing we have today is our guest. We have David Horton with us. And David is with Think, spelled with a Y, a fintech transformation provider. So he's the kind of guy that can come in and look at what you're doing from the perspective of digital and come up with solutions. And having followed him for a bit, I know these aren't he shows up and already has the presentation in his back pocket. This is the sort of person that really is involved in the success of the organization. He frequently writes and speaks about fintech topics. You can find him at a lot of conferences and in the payment space. He gets sort of the tech side of it, which is my side, but he also understands the business side as well. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure. So, David, where are you coming from today? Where are you at?
So, I currently live in New York. Mm-hmm. Have been here for the last couple of years, about 3 years or so. But prior to that, spent a lot of my time in the Middle East working out of Dubai for a good 10 years.
Wow.
But and London before that. So I'm a bit of a nomad in terms of wherever I lay my hat.
Yeah, I can kind of see that your background there is completely blank. Like you probably don't decorate or anything. You just
there's no point.
You throw down a sleeping bag, and weirdly you put a tent in the room you're in and sleep in that. Kind of like what was it, Tom Hanks when he came back from what was that movie?
Castaway.
Yeah, he could sleep on the bed. So actually, interesting. You picked a great time to live in New York. I know you know that. just a phenomenal opportunity to experience New Yorkers on the street and just go see, well, maybe not, but that's kind of the topic today. So, David, I tried to talk a little bit about your background, but why don't you give us the nickel tour of Think, and then let's get into our topic about sort of Work 2.0. Sure. I think it's very valid. I also kind of want to touch on, I think that another shutdown is imminent. It's already happening. And I think it's particularly relevant to the Work 2.0 topic. So, but go ahead and just give us a little background on David.
Sure. So, I mean, my background really was predominantly in the technology space, followed in the footsteps of my dad, who was a developer, and found myself really doing technology jobs in the financial sector. Initially in London, I worked for Reuters and the sort of provider side of things. But then later on, as I moved to the Middle East, I worked in a number of different banks in different types of technology roles. And it really kind of spanned from your entry-level technology job where you're helping and doing support calls and things like that. And then I took a little bit of a specialization in the cybersecurity space to understand that.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Were you working at the Bank of Abu Dhabi when, it came out that our NSA had sort of infiltrated them? Because that would have been around that time.
No, I wasn't, fortunately, not working for that bank. But no, I worked for a large private-owned bank in the Middle East. And really focused on, being a CIO. So looking at operational.
I had an awkward moment with the CTO of the Bank of Abu Dhabi in Lisbon. I was hanging out and he sat next to me. I'm like, oh, hey, and he's very nice. And I looked at him and it was like the day that the news broke on the phone about the NSA breaking in. I was like, oh yeah, I'm American, and yeah, we just wanted to see your ACH. We were just wondering what was going on. We're curious Americans. That's what we are. So yeah, I can imagine that sort of work would really enlightened you to the world's sort of banking behaviors, and seeing this across the board would give you a lot of perspective, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think if you just look at the level of compliance and regulatory, rules that have come in, the Middle East is trying to abide by the rules and be responsible. And, like every other country, I think they have their challenges. But yeah, I mean, my role was really very tech focused. But I think around 2014, 2015, I came across a gentleman called Brett King, who started saying things that I thought was very interesting, and we had some debates, and I found myself sort of questioning the direction that our own bank was going, and managed to convince the CEO at the time that there was a new role that really needed to be in the organization, and that was that person between the tech guys and the business guys who made them come together, and basically, looked at digital as something that was going to be transformative. Before the days when digital transformation was a buzzword, that was something that we really looked at. And that ultimately became my passion. So cut a few years later, I set up Think Digital, really to be that sort of niche type digital consultancy, which would help banks, I would like to say, digitize better or become more digital. I'm very cognizant of using that, digital transformation. Everybody wants to use it. I think you can't digitally transform overnight. It takes many years. And so that was really the sort of the birth of the company. It was really trying to help, introducing things like experience design and agile into the culture of the organization. And as it would have coincidence, we tended to end up doing a lot of physical based projects for banks. And by physical, I mean things like looking at their branches, building things like innovation labs or innovation centers within the bank so that they could start, to adopt some of these cultures, look at agile and rapid prototype development. And so, it wasn't by design, but we ended up doing a lot of work where there was a combination of the digital and the physical side of things. And that's obviously led us to, the topic of what we're discussing today, which is a lot of banks see us as having good insights into not only how fintechs operate, but just generally the startup world, and how do banks adopt some of those principles in order to become a little bit more nimble, a little bit more efficient. And so WorkPoint 2.0 is really about the evolving nature of business, particularly in the financial space. And obviously, I would say a lot of people tend to say that the pandemic has been the instigator of this, which is not necessarily true. I mean, I think we were already evolving towards a new way of work. If you look at, most people today, they have friends where their colleagues have worked from home for a couple of years, and it's not something new. I think what the pandemic did is it kind of made it mandatory, en masse for everybody. You didn't have a choice.
I feel like it accelerated it, what was already happening. I think it accelerated it for the members who were, and I've got a question about that. I want to get back to that. But before I go too far, this Brett King character, there's a Brett King guy that owes me money. You don't happen to know where, like, you don't have an address or something. We'll get back. After the show.
The Brett I know, he's Australian. He's no chance of getting money.
Yeah, Australians, they're not good news. He's got like a Cockney accent, but it always sounds smarter because, he talks in the accent.
Absolutely.
But I think the acceleration has been interesting from the Work 2.0 standpoint. But we've also seen, and I thought this was fascinating, this is kind of new information that I'm going to share sort of out there. But as Kevin Sarber, who is on the call here, Kevin is our president, we've been doing interviews with various credit unions, talking to them about sort of as they reopened, what happened, right?
Yeah. So
what happened when they closed was you saw, a lot of organizations who had done capacity planning around, say, a 75, 80% of their membership, given that was way above the active amount of membership that was using digital services, suddenly not have enough capacity and struggle on that side. But then we saw members who, and by the way, I'm using all this credit union terminology. I'm going to try to teach you slowly along the way. Sure. You say the word bank a lot, and we're going to teach you that that's a credit union and they have members. But this idea that, not that we care that much, but the idea that there were members who'd never tried a remote deposit capture, right? And so this went on. But then when the branches reopened, there was this thought process that, these people that now have experienced the wondrous, magical digital, now that they drank the Kool-Aid and they've gotten on their knees and worshiped at the altar of their iPhone, they'll never be back to a branch. They'll never show up. And yet we're finding that that's not the case. Like, even though they succeeded at this transaction, or we don't know, I don't have enough information just yet, but even though they, from what we can tell, succeeded at this transaction, they still have a preference now that they can go back to their old way. So does that mean that we snapped back a little too quickly and they were just like, okay, I don't have time to fidget with that. I did it twice. Yeah, it was kind of a pain and I don't feel real super comfortable with it. I'm still going back to the branch. Or is it they did it twice, it was fine, but they still just want to see their buddy Mike Lawson, who is really friendly at the branch. And that's, I think that is the $64,000 question at the moment, for me anyways.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you because I think things are still changing, right? Look, I often look back at March. March was the month when, for the first time, we all probably locked in home for longer than we've ever been before, and we're hit with a whole, a mountain of new ways of doing things. The kids were at home, everybody was at home, you were trying to do work. And a month or two after that, I think a lot of people said, right, this is the new norm, and I actually work much more efficiently from home, and I'm really happy with this style of working. And that was a month or two after, I would say, March. Take another 2 months after that, and everybody's like, well, I don't want to be at home anymore. I hate it here. You know, I haven't met my colleagues. I hate the children. And I think, you know, it was a novelty for a lot of people. And so they kind of liked it. But after a while, the novelty wears off and you start to resort back to some of your old habits. And I think the new norm, which is what everybody's talking about, it isn't one or the other. It's maybe somewhere in between where, you know, there is still a requirement for a physical presence, a brick and mortar. Maybe less so because people have been able to do other transactions, you know, through digital channels. But, you know, we as humans, we like to interact in person, and that's part of our instinctive nature, right? And I think you can't suppress that and say, just because you can do digital, that's the way it's always going to be. Because I have this debate fairly often with a number of people. And today, there is actually no logical reason why we need to ever leave our house, right? We could do everything on digital. We could order our supermarket shopping, our clothes, our kids can get educated. But we all know that's not really what we want. And that capability has been around for a good 10, 15 years, right? So if you look at the days of Skype, what was that, early 2000s? You know, video conferencing isn't some revolutionary new concept. It's been around for a while. And I think it's a great tool. It allows us to collaborate, and it definitely feels a lot more personal. But it's not the answer to everything. I think some people just lack that human touch, or would like that human touch. And that's really, I think, Work 2.0 is all about that middle ground between being empowered to do your job using the digital tools that you've got, but at the same time still feeling part of a community of employees and colleagues where you can bounce creativity and ideas off of each other, or simply have a coffee and a joke and talk about the game last night.
What about like taking stuff from other people's desks and putting it in Jello? Is something I like.
That's right up there on the top.
Yeah. So on this Work 2.0 concept, so one of the other things that I've discovered as I talk to a lot of credit unions is that this idea that the call center was dispersed has adversely affects service. It turns out that the call center is a hive mind, I guess is what I'm calling it. And that because their proximity, they rely on each other to some extent. Although I would think that chat tools and things like that could still open it up, but I guess it's the, you know, cover the mic and go, hey, Bob, you know, how do you turn off e-statements or whatever, that reliable conversation that is not happening. Plus, I think there was this concept that you could just sort of take branch people and immediately turn them into call center people, and that they were interchangeable, which apparently from what I'm hearing, and I want to confirm some of this with, if anybody wants to speak to that a little bit, that's on the call, I'd love to hear from you from a credit union perspective. Just, you know, pop in the chat there and let us know. But this idea that that there was this sort of hive mind happening because we don't really have strong knowledge bases that are in use and those sorts of things. It tends to be rote. Is that kind of also, besides the cultural aspect of it, is that also something that Work 2.0 encompasses?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say at the core of the new world of work is communication and collaboration, right? And communication is probably everything that the call center stands for. I think what took the industry a little bit by surprise is there is somewhat of a physical dependence for the call center staff, because you know, yes, they're on the end of the phone and they are helping you, but in front of them is a access to their core system. Now, not only do you need to have the right security in place to enable people to access that, but there's also the physical aspect of it, which is, do you really want people having access to your core banking and doing things whilst they're at home and there's no level of governance? And so I think whilst technically possible, sometimes some of the information security risks had to be considered, and that was some of the challenge. We did a project a year or so back before the pandemic, and it was very much a similar circumstance. We had a client who had a very large call center, and it was around 2,000-3,000 people who were employed in that call center. And then a very popular e-commerce company that we all know and buy stuff from set up their call center the next building and offered double the wages. And overnight.
Does that name rhyme with like Glamazon or something? Or
it rhymes with that word, yeah.
Okay, we know them.
But they offered a much better salary to their call center staff, and lo and behold, what happened is one call center emptied, and 2,000 or 3,000 moved over to the building next door, and they were hemorrhaging in their support calls, so they needed some tools and something to alleviate that. And so we we had to get creative, and yes, chatbots are getting better. They're definitely not the answer to everything, but if you want to alleviate first line calls and things like that, then a good chatbot can help you manage those sort of things. So those are the types of technologies that I think are influencing all the customer facing type services that you offer, call center being one of those.
So let's go with this. It is okay. You are CEO of post-pandemic credit union, the PPCU. And PPCU was just about to build a whole new campus. They hadn't started yet. So fortunately, the pandemic kind of hit, before they broke ground or bought the property. But now they're reevaluating that. And you've decided to implement your Work 2.0 sort of program here. What does that look like? Give me and let's start off with what we just talked about. I think the call center is a good place to start. But just how does that all evolve? What does the future of this look like?
Okay, great question. So for me, Work 2.0 is really four things, four areas. I think the first one is your physical space, the offices or the facilities that you have that your employees can come to. And I think there's no better time to consolidate now. I don't think people are looking, not everyone is looking for more office space. If anything, I think we're looking to downsize, but also just generally change the nature of the workspace so that it is more collaborative, so that it is a little less corporate, a little bit more Google, and I don't mean you have to stick a ping pong table in every floor, but there is an element of introducing the sort of comfortable wellness coffee shop factor to the offices, which people like. People like to work in that type of environment. But I think, reimagining the physical look and feel of your offices and the types of tools that they have, do they leverage the latest in technologies? Things like, does your mobile phone aid you whilst you're around the building and things like that? So that's the first area I would say we'd look at. The second really is a big job for the HR department, because I think you need to reevaluate the organization structure. The days of the old hierarchy within a bank are very rapidly coming to an end. If you compare what you see in a typical challenger fintech startup bank, their org structure represents absolutely nothing like what a large incumbent bank does.
Well, they organize like a software technology company.
Exactly, and more like an agile Scrum team, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always said if you want to make magic with products, then you take somebody who knows the business and knows all of the challenges and knows the consumer and who their audience is, and you couple them with a very clever developer, and you add to that somebody who's creative and is a design experience person. And those are the three core skills that when you put them together is when you come up with something very, something beautiful, a product that works well, addresses the market's need, and looks beautiful and easy to use. I'm kind of dumbifying it a little bit, simplifying it here. But if you take that and you expand that out throughout the org structure, and you kind of move from this hierarchy to this kind of holocracy, you start to see that it also dictates the way that we work. The biggest complaint I hear from a lot of our clients is, I sit in 2 or 3 1-hour, 2-hour meetings every day. I really get 5 minutes to contribute to that meeting. And let's face it, when we all leave, nobody knows what they're actually supposed to do. We'll probably have another meeting to discuss that. And so I think there's a lot of bent up frustration that meetings consume, valuable productive time. If you kind of look at the technology world and how Agile and Scrum works, it starts off with a 10-minute stand-up huddle where everybody basically says, right, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And really the horizon isn't much more than a couple of days from there. And that's what facilitates this kind of rapid prototyping, rapid development cycle. You fail fast, you do it again. If you have failed, well, it's only a day or two. You can make it up and get to where you're going. Whereas traditionally, the sort of waterfall approach, which is I'm going to write a 50-page document and all my requirements. I want my system to do this. Then you hand it to somebody and say, come back in 8 months and, it better be what I asked for, which it very rarely is, because things change, you require feedback. All of these kind of, changes in the way that we work are dictating the companies that are flourishing. And that kind of takes me into the third area, which is you got to evaluate the skills within the bank, right? There's probably I would say 10% new roles that never existed in a bank every year. And so if you look back 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe a little longer, 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a social media manager. Nobody needed to do that. That was just something that, kids did. Nowadays, you're looking at usability testers, experienced designers, at glut of new roles. Now, the big conundrum for banks is how do they repurpose some of their existing staff so that maybe they fit into those roles and they can contribute with some of the experience that they've got. But for me, the skills gap is probably the biggest worry for a lot of the organizations today. There's a lot of robotic process automation, which is, killing a lot of jobs that, traditionally were very repetitive and mundane. But there's equally a whole set of new jobs that are coming into play where there is a distinct, shortage of those skills. So that's really, I think, a very big part of, the new work 2.0 is being agile enough to adapt and change to the environment, come up with new types of roles and responsibilities. And that means, writing new job descriptions, coming up with new policies, looking at a segregation of duties between various types of positions in the bank. It's not an easy thing. I'm well aware. It's probably the most difficult because it really eats at the core culture of a bank, right? And you can speak the game about we want to change, we want to become more fintech, but that hurts. It's not an easy job to tell people that they have a different reporting structure, or the criteria for how they get their bonus every year is completely different to what they've done in the past. All these factors need to be considered. And then I would say fourth, and probably the closest to my heart, is the new types of technologies, emerging technologies and tools that are available. We've been talking cloud for many years. I think it's a foregone conclusion now that we have to move to the cloud, right? The cloud is the only way you can genuinely scale, and expand your business with a cost base that's effective, that makes sense. Equally, the types of tools and technologies that are coming out really empower people to do a lot more. We've spent in our own firm probably the last 2 months really getting to grips with things like virtual reality and augmented reality, where previously I always felt they were a little bit gimmicky or great for a game, or you wanted to go on a virtual roller coaster. Okay, it was great. But there was there was some processing power lacking, and again some skills. But for those of you who want to start dabbling in this area, the new Oculus Quest 2 came out a couple of weeks back, and whilst the initial motive for it was, we can play some games with the kids, there are some tools out there that are enterprise grade already that allow 3D avatar collaboration across the globe. Not only can you physically see people and you can interact with them, but you can share documents, you can share collaboration. I mean, if I had to describe it, this meeting that we're having right now, if we were doing it through a sort of AR VR mode, we'd all appear in physical presence of each other. We'd be able to, high five. I'd be able to hand over a video or a document, or allow you to look at some code or a product construct, something like that. And it's become a lot more fluid now. So I think we are really at that pivotal change inflection point where these technologies are going to go mainstream, and we're really going to be thinking about how it impacts the business.
No, I would
There was
agree.
a lot of talking.
Yeah, no, I like where you went with this. Let me comment. I feel like those 4 topics built on each other, and I want to jump in on that. But just real quick to sort of make your point,
Sure.
I just spoke at the Voice of Money yesterday, which is a group that focuses in on voice technology in particular. And one of the things they asked me is, what's the future here? And I said, well, as we're looking at, for example, this is not a prototype, but it's a mock-up of what Apple has delivered as a patent for their glasses technology, HoloLens, those sorts of things, and telepresence is a thing, tele-presence, if you will. But I thought what you were saying was interesting. So somebody asked me, well, how does this relate to money? And I said, well, let's take a look at this. So here's an example of using AR, or actually XR in this case, along with what we call anchors, right? These are augmented reality anchors. And so basically you look at this place, this Eat Unique, and you ask what the rating is, and you get a rating for it. Now, again, they were like, well, what's that have to do with, our bank account? Well, what it has to do with that is they're going to spend money in there. I thought that was an interesting concept. And then over here in a shopping place, hey, does this come in other colors? And basically looking at it, and eye tracking has come a long way too. So this is actually a project called World Gaze. So I think you're right. And I think one of the challenges has always been determining where that inflection point is. And I think your ideas built on each other pretty well. Let me jump in and I want to jump in and ask a few questions about those different areas. So the first one was this place. And I do agree with you. It can't be this stuffy place that it was, right? And so the design of whatever it is you're trying to build has sort of a much more, it's like, a really good drinking game is to watch, what's that, HGTV, where they're rebuilding houses. And every time someone says open concept, you have to drink, you'll just be hammered after about the first 2.5, 3 minutes, right? It's constant open concept, right? Absolutely. But that is kind of what the idea is. But what I found interesting was this idea that you said that the workplace would interact with their phone. Can you give an example of that? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so we actually developed a solution for a bank. It started off as a requirement to address one, but then we quickly realized that we were onto something. The way I kind of describe it to my clients is, you think of when you take your phone onto an airplane, you switch it into a plane mode. Well, the idea around the app was when you walk into a building or an office, it goes into office mode. And small things like being able to get in the lift and use, instead of using an access card, you could use NFC on your phone to do it.
Hold on just a second. For my American friends, a lift is an elevator. I'm good at translating. As I said, I've traveled the world. So
and this app would basically empower you to do a lot of things, like, you want to book a meeting room within the building, it would allow you to do that. We even went as far as to build a sort of HR chatbot. So, if I wanted to know how many, days leave I'd had this year and how many have I got left and book it, I could just pull out my phone and it was like working with WhatsApp. It was very simple. And so we kind of built upon that, and we've got more and more functionality built into it. But I mean, if you think about it, it's a device in our pocket and we walk around with it all day. Why wouldn't we use it?
Oh yeah, and in most cases, it's stronger in terms of processing power than the system that's sitting on their desk. Now, here was the feature I thought you were going to say, and I was super excited about this. For many years, I worked in many buildings, and particularly when I was at Westcom, which was in California, and I was out of town. I found that there was, and we're going to be honest with each other. This is a candid program, okay? So we're just going to be candid. We all have a stall we like. I'm just saying, like, you find a bathroom stall and you're like, yeah, that's the one. And the worst situation is you go in there and it's already taken, right, Zach? I know Zach agrees with me. And so if your app would let me know when the stall's available, I'm in. I mean, we got to be practical about what these apps can do. So you can have that feature. I'll hand it to you. By the way, I've already worked out how to do it. Just some small sensors, pressure sensors in the toilets. I'm willing to give you the prototype. But moving on from stall availability, Zach, am I right?
You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, because that makes me feel better about, it's important to know, you have business to do beyond the credit union business, and you can quote me on that. This next idea that you had, by the way, Zach, I think MemberPass would play well into an app like that. MemberPass is a identity program that it's kind of coming to fruition in here. The next thing you talked about was this org chart and the idea that it needed to be adjusted from a technology standpoint, right? This idea that, and so give me an example, like what's a department? I got my own ideas. Like I can almost immediately say, you have to rethink things like ATMs and where they are in the organization or payments. But what's an example of something you would say to an organization, a standard organization, that you come in and you see this very traditional org chart that lays out like many other banks? Give me an example of something you might roll up or change.
Well, I mean, I always try to put them into a situation that could one day become a reality. So let's assume there's a challenger bank that's being phenomenally successful, and for whatever reason they decide they're going to acquire bank ABC, and that bank ABC has been around for a couple of years. Do you think when that bank turns up that they're going to say, actually, we think the way you work is more efficient, so we're going to adapt ourselves to
that happens every time, yeah. And
or are they going to say, right,
yeah,
let's ruffle some feathers here and let's do things a little bit differently? I think a lot of the industry created these hierarchies based on what they thought the regulator wanted, or compliance, or so you have the IT department, and those guys are just the IT guys. You have the compliance team, and you have the business team, and the business team thinks the IT team don't deliver on time, and the IT team thinks the business guys haven't got a clue what they're doing. This is what happens when you get silos within an organization. And that inherently builds up these kind of firewalls between communication, right? And you start to get finger pointing as to who's not delivering on time. I think when you're a startup, you don't have that luxury. It's either we do this or we're all out of a job and, we go bust. So I think that forces collaboration, and you start to sort of see everybody vested in the success of an organization. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're a big Wells Fargo or Chase or one of the huge, you cannot simply just abandon the hierarchy that you've always had and go with, right, we're going to operate like Chime or Monzo does now, because let's be realistic, that's never going to happen. It's not the kind of cultural step that a large organization like that can take. But what I would say is you can start to introduce bit by bit slightly new ways of operating and slightly new ways of working, which will over time push the culture in that general direction. And so, I don't see a business and a technology and a compliance team as, opponents within the same organization. They really are a products team. Come together, you have each your own unique set of skills that you can contribute to, the success of the firm, and work better using better collaboration tools. And so, I said, I use this word holocracy. It's really about...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I think I'm part of a holocracy here at my house. That's where like there's one person and they're always right and you're always wrong, right?
Yeah, that's a kind of
the
different.
house. Yeah, I recognize that structure.
No, I think Holocracy, it's a bit of a nirvana that.
Oh, that's a herocracy, whole different thing. Gotcha.
I think it's all about, empowering people to make decisions, and it's not about how senior they are within the organization. It's more about, is the remit of that decision within that person's responsibilities within the organization? If so, go ahead and make a decision.
Sure.
Obviously, get feedback, get people's points of views, go to the experienced people. But ultimately,
that leads to the next thing you were talking about, which was failing. But let me go back just for a second. So here's my thought on how things evolve in credit unions, and I'm going to throw it at Kevin and Zach. Kevin's the former senior vice president of the credit union, as am I, and Zach is a current EVP, SVP in that space somewhere. But so when something pops up, let's say it's like ATMs. I mean, ATMs were sort of this brand new thing in 1979 or whenever they would start to pop up, and people looked around and the thing that was hardest about the ATMs was balancing them. So guess where ATMs wound up as a business function? They wound up in accounting. And so Zach, is that your experience as well? And Kevin, you too?
Yeah, I mean, that was our experience. Absolutely. We recently did a realignment of our org chart last year, the end of last year, and created our payments team that now reports up to me. So I've got our digital banking, our call center, and then our payments team. And payments includes ITMs and ATMs as well as.
Zach, just real quick, can you give everybody a little background on Forefront, where you are, your role, and also for David, just real quick?
Oh yeah, Forefront Credit Union. We're a $715 million credit union in Northern Michigan in Traverse City. I'm a senior vice president of strategic innovation is the title. And I work with our digital banking contact center and then our payments team now, and then any fintech relationships and those kind of things that we have. So
that reorg where you pulled ATMs out of recognizing it as a channel and less as a accounting burden, was that, to David's point, was that counterculture? Was that painful?
Yeah, it was, because it was that cards was on finance side. Wires and everything was under accounting, again, from a balancing GLs, all that. And we took it from a move money standpoint and knowing that payments is where a lot of, innovation is happening. Why is it living in the least innovative part of the credit union? And so moved it over to where I'm at so that we can expand that, grow that, and just approach that as what it really is versus that back office function.
Yeah. Kevin, you want to? I saw that little smile when he said accounting's the least innovative. I think you offended Kevin, but it's okay.
Oh, I apologize.
No, I'm just joking.
All due respect.
You could not offend Kevin if you wanted to, but go ahead, Kevin.
No, I think you're right on. I think in addition to the things you mentioned, I think the alignment between the channels, having somebody like you leading those areas and having the same ideas across those different channels makes good sense. I think there are a lot of credit unions who are still stuck, like you said, John. I know how I got started with ATMs in the early 80s.
He's being nice.
I was the youngest one in the department. I had the least tenure, and they said, "Hey, these ATMs are a pain. Here you go. You're the ATM coordinator." That was my first big job.
You look young and you might figure out this fancy machine. Good luck with you. Yeah, and we see that a lot. But what's interesting is that's a physical channel, right, Kevin? But then we look at something like analytics, which is a whole different thing. So I don't want to get too far into that, but I think that's the point you're trying to make, David. So my next thing is, I want to get on the skills and talent, and these two things go together. You mentioned failing fast. So we have a problem in the banking / credit union industry, specifically in the credit union industry, which is failure is not in our vocabulary. We probably, when you said that, we lost a few people because this idea of failure is just a crushing idea for everyone. And because we conflate it with, someone being incompetent or incompetency. And how do you overcome that? Because Zach, I throw it at you, how many people are trying to get to that 100% before they get that app out, which is very much that waterfall type of approach, because their fear is that they'll get an onslaught of calls into the call center, which is a cardinal sin in the that's like you put something out that causes calls to the call center, like next day you're going to find like a horse's head dead, chopped off in your chair, just bloody. That's how that works. And so, am I wrong, Zach?
No, I know it's true. Typically, and again, that's why, having all that kind of under me, I understand what the impact is going to be, but I think communication is just key there, right? What the customer doesn't like getting is when they hear about it first from a member who's upset and they didn't know it was coming, right? If you can prep them enough, I think you're okay. But we did a couple fintech investments last year, and on one of them, I really pushed our CEO on it, and I said, "So what are you going to do if this doesn't work out?" And he's like, "I'm going to question your next recommendation." And so like it put a lot of that pressure on there, right? Of I hope I get a win the first time up, because if I don't get it, then.
But that's not realistic. That's not when you win. It's the next 10. So David, speak to that for a second. I mean, is that culture that you're running into as well?
Yeah, I mean, of course, nobody wants to come up, put their hand up and say, "Hey guys, I'm the failure here. Let's celebrate." That's just realistically not the way it works. But I think there are different ways of framing it and explaining what fail fast really means. I think fail fast, generally the perception here is, we did a huge project, it failed, you should just let us go. And that's not what fail fast. Fail fast for me means, hey,
let us go quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, for me, it means we did a day or two's work. We might have to throw that day or two of work away because we got it wrong. But we've course corrected, and ultimately we're going to end up with exactly what we wanted because we were brave enough to say, you know what, we went the wrong way. Let's just cut our losses and get going. Fail fast is also something that has been very successful in a number of other industries. For instance, you look at the VC world. I was always told in companies, in the hope that one of them does great. That is a culture of failure, because you're buying 9, duffers, basically. You're saying for every, 10 companies we buy, we only need one of them to do really well. And I always take that sort of philosophy and see, well, where did that work in the banking industry? And one of the countries that I think really embodied this was Turkey. Turkey, for a good few years, particularly when their regulator was a little bit relaxed, all the banks there decided, you know what, we're not going to try 1 or 2 innovation projects. We're going to try all of them. And they literally spent, their time doing every single type of innovative idea that they could possibly get their hands on. And a lot of them, failed and went away. But the net result was, for many years, Turkey was right up there with one of the most innovative banking industries globally. And that's a really good example of showing that, if you put the time in and you're willing to accept failure, you will at one point stumble across success, and that success will be more than adequate to cover all of the failures that you've done in the past.
Yeah, I think the fear that's in the Korean space is it's the conservative nature of the organizations, and specifically that I agree that it needs to be reframed. The idea that, I'll give you an example. Kevin and I once worked on a project where my idea was, hey, all of our members have more loans with other institutions than they do with us. And rather than trying to get a new member with a new loan, why don't we try to get the current members to move these loans here? And they wanted a super simple way to do it. And I said, all right, well, let's just take a picture of the statement and text it to us. We'll figure out the rest. And that was a complete flop. I think we got like 2. And Kevin tried to fire me, as he always does. That happened, but that was like once a week occurrence. That wasn't new. That's why he works for me now. The tables are turned, my friend. But now that, but the pivot that we came up with together was, hey, it turns out, take a picture of the credit card itself. And we started seeing 200-300 of those a month, Kevin, that were just people trying to reevaluate their banking transfer. And that was super simple. And we just wanted the front and the back. You know what the bank back gave us? The phone number to the institution. And it was that simple, but we never would have figured that out without the pivot. Go ahead, Kevin. I see you unmuted.
No, that's okay. I was just going to validate what you're saying. The simplest change turned out to make the outcome totally different, and we just would have never thought of it that way.
Right. The idea was sound. I just forgot that nobody gets statements anymore. And the pivot was the change. And that turned out to be a big deal. I think it's still in play today in the app, the last I looked. And so, but the thing is that the first failure could have resulted in, well, that didn't work. Let's not try any more of Zach's ideas. And unfortunately, that leads me to the next and last topic here. And I want to take some questions. This idea of talent. So I 100% agree with you that skills and talents need to be assessed. But the challenge that we're having in the industry is that attracting talent to our culture is a big issue. So for instance, one of the best programmers I know, he's not someone I would want to drag to a meeting in a bank somewhere. He's also not someone that could make it through a metal detector. He likes his piercings, and I saw Jeff Dent on here. I don't know if he's still on here, but Jeff and I've had this discussion. Hey, Jeff, you want to unmute? Jeff is also one of the best programmers I know. He rarely wears pants. I
That's a prerequisite, I think.
That's a fact.
I do wear shorts though. To be clear.
Yeah, but they're really tight, and but Jeff, can you speak to that from from your even inside a core company? Jeff, give us who you are, if you don't mind, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for the invite. My name's Jeff Dent. I'm the CTO here at Correlation. We're core processing in the credit union space here in the U.S. Had a previous life at another vendor who's one of our competitors now, but we've been around for about 12 years now.
But just one of the most talented programmers I know, and we have this discussion a lot, which is even inside a core vendor, you kind of struggle to get people because of the culture of your clients to get those programmers. Am I wrong? And you and I were once those programmers, so we could joke about it. But
yeah, it's tough because at some point you're dealing with technologies that they're not accustomed to out of college and things like that. And with legacy cores, you run into that more. But luckily for us, we're newer, so we have more newer technologies that we're leveraging. I heard cloud and things like that, which we now support as of our latest Linux release. So it is tough. It's a unique space that we're in, but at the same time, I think there's always something you could leverage, whether it's on the digital space or the. I see John.
Yeah, I was sort of also like when I first met Jeff and I share something in common. We both play in bands. Jeff's a great bass player, and he used to show up in like cut up jeans, and this was the early 90s, and I don't know what he's wearing these days. I'm not kidding, but I'm more talking about like, I've seen dudes that they've got face tattoos, but man, they're the most brilliant Rust programmer I've ever run into. But you can't put that person. And maybe you guys have overcome that correlation, but definitely not inside the credit union space. And Zach, you could speak to this as well, but that's where I'm running into some issues, is that the top talent, they can go work somewhere where they don't care what they look like, but yet we have this stigma in our world.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I have developers that have blue hair, all different colors.
So you've been able to overcome that, but you're not in the financial space where there's
right.
a culture that's hanging on to that. Zach, what's your experience?
We're focusing on fintech more, allowing people to be themselves and being creative. Certainly, when you're in the credit union space, there's more constraints, it seems like. But at the same time, for us, we're focusing on what's the next thing that we can focus on, and the ones that are going to bring that to the table are the young ones and the unique ones that think outside the box. And that's what we're focusing on,
man. But now we're just losers, just old losers, playing old '80s songs in the basement with our basses. Zach, you were gonna speak up there. Have you guys defeated that at Forefront?
I think for the most part, yeah, we have where we're a little more conservative still is our branch member facing staff, because we do have some older members and people who do still have trust issues with people who look different, right? But contact center is full of people with multicolored hair. We don't have policies against tattoos or piercings. Our communication center manager who leads a team of 40 people on ITMs and calls has sleeve tattoos on her hands. Does some kind of wild hair and stuff too. Like we're okay with that, if the talent's there, but there is still a little bit of that kind of hypocrisy in that once that goes to the front of the house, we're a little more concerned with how that plays with that membership. We do try to look at that regionally though as well. Traverse City is a little more progressive. A lot of Chicago transplants and those kind of things here in Traverse City. You go 10 minutes down the road and you're in a very rural, very conservative area. So.
This reminds me of this commercial. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm just going to play this little second of it because it's pretty funny. But there's no blue. It's we all see it. This guy walks by with the blue hair, and he's trying to teach him not to react to him. I think it's a progressive commercial, but that's exactly what we're experiencing in this industry. But the top talent, on top of what Jeff said, which is dealing with legacy technology, like, hey, you can go build drones for the military, or you can obscure these 16 digits with X's. You choose.
Yeah.
Now, and oh, by the way, the 16 digits, they're in COBOL 78, and the 78 stands for the year, buddy. I think that's a part of it. But then there's the incentive structures, which was another thing you touched on. It's tough to get people around when they can, just like Amazon showed up and stole your call center. So these are all challenges that we face that it sounds like you're trying to address in a organized way with the Work 2.0. Before I get to new tech, can you give me an idea of what, I just want everybody to hear what you think an incentive structure might look like for folks that are delivering in that space.
So for us, I mean, it's a constant challenge to attract that talent because, like you've said, banking isn't construed as that really exciting space, but we invest a lot of time in trying to get everybody to buy into the vision that they're going to do something that's got real value to it. It's going to be changing society. And so we get our own employees to buy into that vision. Again, we have zero restrictions on how you look, what you do, as long as you're skilled and you can do the job the way we want you to do the job, then you can look however you want. But then obviously we're not the bank. But I think, from a technology standpoint, the one way to attract talent is also to throw them into new technologies. Most technologists love dealing with the latest and the greatest of something. I spoke about VR and AR. We recently made a decision that to some of our developers who are traditionally mobile developers, which said, do you know what? Go and spend some time building something in VR, AR. We don't know what it is that you're going to build. Just build something. And in order to do that, they needed to do some training. So, we said, right, go and learn Unreal Engine. And all of a sudden they're like, well, hey, this is cool. I'm learning the stuff that, Fortnite is made on. And all of a sudden their job actually starts to have more meaning and it starts to, be something that they're interested in. I think it was Google who said they give 20% of the time to the employees to just mess around and come up with stuff. I don't know if that's the right amount.
They also have a whole division that they celebrate failures.
Yeah. These are the types of things that you've got to do. Traditionally, I would have said incentives were your bonus, right? For most bankers, that's what they're thinking. Like, hey,
But you're saying an incentive could be a Quest 2 or go play with Unreal.
Or it could simply be something like, maybe you can work flexible hours during the week. Maybe you don't have to come in 9 to 5. You want to work, 2 till 7 or whatever it is.
Pants are optional for you. You don't have to
I have a set of.
Mac wrote that down. I saw him write it down. Well, listen, we're right at time here, and I like to try to keep these on track. So before we go, and we'll make sure we get this out to everybody, where can everybody find you if they thought this was great? And also, I think you should continue this conversation with Lawson on his show. I think that would be very valuable. But where can everybody find you if they want to, they want to hear more about this? They want you to talk to their board, whatever it is that is out there.
So my email address is david.horton, HORTON, @thinkdigital.com. Feel free to send me an email if there's anything that
with a Y. I'm putting that into the chat, and we'll make sure that we put it out there for everyone. And David, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Very exciting discussion, and I think you're on the right track. That these are things we have to sort of lay out. But I really liked your organization of the strategy. I think it does begin with the physical and end with sort of this digital in the tech space. And so very, very cool.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. Be safe.
Well done. Good job.
Thank you, everyone.